So we'd like to welcome you to the last edition of our Science and Cooking lecture series. It's very sad. This time we've come equipped with aprons. You'll all remember that every week, for those of you who've been coming religiously, we've had an equation of the week, which we've made you clap for. But now we've managed to put them all on an apron so that when you cook, you can wear them and remember that these equations represent the essence of cooking. That was a bit of a joke. Okay, so we always start, as always, we start by acknowledging our many sponsors. Yes? Oh, wrong one. Is this going to work? So we start by acknowledging our many sponsors who've helped put this series of events on. So Jose Andres' Think Food Group and the Alicia Foundation provided both financial and intellectual support, and we're very grateful for that. Whole Foods has continued to donate foods for our labs. So in the last couple of weeks, this has become particularly complex because we have 125 teams who are doing final projects on different topics, and Whole Foods has continued to come through and donate the majority of the food that is used for this, and we're very grateful to them. Harvard University Office of Faculty Development and Diversity, Cole Palmer donated equipment for the labs. Le Creuset, from whom we have some of representatives here, was one of our main sponsors, and we're very grateful for them. So the last time that Le Creuset was here, Nandu Giovanni was lecturing, and an amazing thing happened, which was in the middle of Nando's lecture on movies that he had prepared before coming. There were Le Creuset pots in the pictures. Now, as it happens today, we will be raffling off some Le Creuset pots so that you all could, some lucky people will win them. Yourselves, you should all have, I was told, a little ticket. And apparently at the end, we're going to be doing a raffle. And so that'll be very exciting. Okay. Mars Chocolate actually was both helped with financial support, and actually for the last week of the class, which was on candy, we didn't get to tell you about our candy week. Mars donated chocolate bars to illustrate various things for our students, and the Asade Business School has been there the whole time. So next slide. Okay, so I also want to thank, we have a little bit more thanking to do today. I'm sorry, I hope you'll bear with me. So we're about to do our final projects. We're entering the last phase of the class. Tomorrow is our final project fair. And there are various entities have donated or helped with prizes for the final projects. And I just want to acknowledge them here. The Alicia Foundation, the Boston Red Sox through their executive chef, Nookie Postal, Salt through Gabe Brenner, Sportello and through Barbara Lynch, and Oleana and Sofra have all donated some of the prizes for our competition, and we're very grateful for them. Okay, and finally, I have one more thanks that I want to give, which is that this, what do I call this? Lecture series. This lecture series, and in fact, this entire venture that we've been putting on for the last several months has been extraordinarily complicated logistically, as you could well imagine if you imagine what must have been required to put this on. And it wouldn't have been possible without one person, namely Christina. Where is Christina? Where is she? Where did she go? Christina. It wouldn't have been possible without Christina. And as a small token of our thanks, it's just a small token. See, you have to come up. You have no choice. We got you flowers. She's been trying to hide, but no one can hide in this crowd. Yeah. Okay. So that's the end of our thanks. So now we're going to start. And so as usual, as is traditional in these things, you have to listen to me or one of us for 10 minutes. That's the usual rule before you guys get to talk, before you get to hear our main show. So David, you haven't seen this before, but Dave and I have felt like the warm-up act. I mean, we've been getting very good at our warm-up act thing, and they all are here to listen to you, of course, but they have to listen to me. And Christina tried to convince me that it should only be 5 minutes because she knew how great this was going to be, but I finagled 8 minutes out of her. And so I now want to treat you all to an 8-minute presentation. So this is actually, I'm not going to talk actually, this is what we call Science and Cooking the Slideshow. Sorry, we have to stop. You take up the leaves and the magic is on. That was the wrong song. Okay, I don't know how to use this thing. How do I do this? Ah, here. Okay. Okay, now we're good. Let's go back. Okay, we're going to try it again. Sorry, Christina, I need another minute. Okay, is that good? Is it going to come on? It's on. Okay, it'll come. Don't worry. This is a little better. I think it'll come on.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. 10. Ground control 9, to Major Tom. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift off. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirts you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in the most peculiar way. And the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. Though I'm past 100,000 miles, I'm feeling very still, and I think my spaceship knows which way to go. Tell my wife I love her very much. She knows. Ground control to Major Tom. Your circuit's dead. There's something wrong. Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear? Am I floating round my tin can? Far above the moon. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
see this. This is the silent part at the beginning of the song. Do you remember when this room smelled like garlic? I remember.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. 10. Ground control 9, to Major Tom. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift off. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirt you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in the most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. Though I'm past 100,000 miles, I'm feeling very still, and I think my spaceship knows which way to go.
That's it.
Tell my
That's it.
wife
No more music. Okay. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce David Chang and his team who've come from New York to end us on the right foot.
Thank you for having us. It's a real honor. This is Daniel Burns. He's head of our lab in New York. He used to be the pastry chef at Noma, the now #1 ranked restaurant in the world. And he's, I don't know why he chose to work with us, but thank you. And you know, I'm just sort of in awe that Harvard would have us here, but more importantly, I don't know if you guys know like the culinary history, but the guys that were on the screen and the women, they really are, without Ferran, without Wiley, without Juan Roca, without Bill Yosas, cuisine would be in a very terrible state right now. And you know, these are the guys that are able to sort of create with they can create with almost anything. You know, they have sometimes I think like Ferran, there's some chefs that have the ability to create food with an endless color palette. They can paint with anything in terms of food. They can get any ingredient and sort of figure out a way to sort of make that dish work and the progression of a meal and use a technique that's never been done before. And these are the chefs that are literally creating the new ways of how you can eat. And Jose Andres, obviously. So it's a real honor to be here. What we do is definitely not what they do. We try to tackle much smaller problems in terms of how we cook. And what we try to celebrate at our restaurants at Momofuku is trying to understand that we're average, that there are better chefs out there, that there are more talented cooks out there. And what we try to do is try to work at it harder than anyone else would and attack problems with a tenacity and trying to find how can I describe it other than like, you guys know the feeling when you come across a painting or an equation or some type of problem and you're like, man, I could have done that. I could have figured that out. Why didn't I do that? It's almost like, abstract expressionism. Like you see like that blue painting on the wall with a white stripe. You're like, I could have done that, but you didn't. And that's what we want to do. And those are the ideas that we want to create at Momofuku, where you're like, God, this is so damn simple. Why didn't I think of that? And instead of trying to, as much as we want to endeavor to be as great as these chefs you've seen, I feel that our strength, and I think we do an admirable job at trying to figure out what we do best, and that's setting boundaries in terms of what we can cook with and how we can cook with. And which is sort of the topic of this conversation. And, again, which is why for me, it's an honor just to sort of, be in the same breath of these guys because they're really creating new ways, Wiley's taken Miklu further than anybody else. I call him the Chuck Yeager of Miklu because nobody's ever going to do Miklu the way he does Miklu, and it's fascinating stuff. And obviously, you could go on and on. But what we do is we really try our best to focus on ideas that if we're given the full color spectrum to work with, we're just going to make something disgusting and nasty. And we found that from the past experience. And the one thing that we do really well is we make mistakes and we make errors. And it's taken, this is coming on 7 years for us at Momofuku, where it just started out with one restaurant. And maybe we could start the slideshow, but as it goes on. But the limits allow us to sort of have an idea of, by defining our boundaries, by putting a floor and a ceiling in terms of what we can work with, it allows us to better analyze our mistakes. And that's what I encourage most at our restaurants, is making mistakes and understanding our limitations within our restaurants. We're not in Boston. We're not. We have very limited resources in New York. You might think that you can get anything in New York. If you've been to our restaurants, you notice that they're really small. They're uncomfortable, and because we would rather focus on the kitchen. And even the kitchen, we're fighting against the building. We're fighting against budget. We're fighting against produce that we can't get, which is why I'm so envious of what California has, what we cannot get. So it dawned on me after thinking about many, many things that, instead of complaining about it, why don't we use that to our strength? Why don't we take whatever food that we have, whether it's apples or just cabbage, why don't we try to make that our own? Why don't we take that as far as we possibly can? And that's sort of become our culinary ethos at Momofuku, is make a mistake, make a calculated mistake, and then make another mistake. And then, so it's sort of like let's take one step backwards to take 3 steps forward. And when I was talking to Amy about it, it sort of shocked me. And she's like, well, her world of science is somewhat familiar and overlaps in the culinary world. And I did terrible in science. I did terrible in school, which is why I became a cook. And I just had a hard time understanding it. But the more I thought about it, the more I let it sort of marinate in my head, the more it made sense to me. It's like, you're going out to make mistakes. You're not going out to find the middle. You're going out to find the extremes, the anomalies that can sort of answer everything else in between. And for us, what we're trying to do is, again, figure out the simple stuff. And for us, what excites us is, I would love to have been able to be the first person to create spherification. That would have been great. But we're not, that's just not our game, We are, again, we try to focus on what we have in New York, and our first restaurant, it was this space. It's 600 square feet. It's now Co., which is a 12-seat restaurant, but 600 square feet is the size of one car garage. And in 2004, we opened it up. It was a 27-seat restaurant, and on a given day, we would do anywhere from 300 to 350 people. And what you'd see is the kitchen. That is what you see is what you get. And in order to make that food, to serve that many people, we had to become not innovative, but the innovation was forced upon us. How were we going to create food that could not only taste good, but could we serve the food at a fast pace that the customers are coming in? Now it's Co. It's a 12-seat restaurant. Again, the space dictated what we are able to do. It literally was falling apart and still falling apart. And 12-seat restaurant is still too much for this space. I think we just destroyed the space. But as you can see, just 2 people and it's small. And but now we're able to, this restaurant is sort of not our crown jewel, but it's our restaurant we're able to have the most, I would say, innovative ideas. We're able to experiment the most. It's able to join and work closely with Daniel and the lab. And that's another thing is like, okay, maybe as singular individuals, we may not be as talented as some of these great chefs. But I feel like if we assemble the team, and again, talking to a lot of the professors here, it's a team effort. And that's what I feel like as a group, we will create something better than an individual. That's our goal. And so hopefully when we get through this, you'll see some of the ideas that we've worked over the past couple of years. And one of the things about errors and creativity that I wanted to touch upon was sometimes you have to go really big. Really big with your idea, really big with an error. And Sambar was a total, utter failure. And I don't know if any of you guys made it the first go-around. It was, we opened up around 2006, and it was, let's make Korean Mexican food. It just sounded so good to me, and it just still does. And thank God Roy Choi's doing it in Los Angeles, but I felt like Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. I was like, if you build it, they will come, and nobody came. So again, limitations in terms of, this is the first time we actually had a budget, and now it's Sam in name only, really. But Sambar we were forced to, we had a limit, a ceiling, literally a bank comes and tells you got 6 months to make this work. Okay, you're gonna throw everything out the window and you're gonna do whatever is possible. You are going to attack the problem with a relentless tenacity that you would probably not have done if everything wasn't on the line. And everything was on the line for us. And what happened was, because we sort of accepted failure, it was the best thing that could have happened to us. By making the biggest mistake possible, we were no longer on anyone's radar. We were able to create with freedom. We were able to sort of be free. It was sort of, it didn't last that long, but it was one of the most beautiful periods in my life, because as a group, again, we were able to create many dishes and just serve food without worrying what anybody was going to expect, because we just expected we were going to go out of business. So there was this sort of this buzz and this great vibe in Sambar, and it's carried on to today. But Sambar, the biggest thing about Sambar, besides it being a crazy incarnation of the restaurant than what it was intended to be, is that we fight against the space every day. There's something that happens. It's fighting with the neighbor next door. Somebody upstairs passed out in the bathtub, and we have a flood. We have, gas is out. There's always something going on. And when you're fighting against the building, it makes you sort of a little bit more passionate about the ideas that you have and trying to make it work. So it's that conflict that makes, I think, Sambar somewhat special for us. So it's no longer the burrito. And Milk Bar, we have a pastry chef, Christina Tosi, who worked out of 700 square feet. It's adjacent to Sambar. And I marveled at the fact that her team was able to create so much food and tailor every recipe to the space. There's no space to cook. They had nothing. As you can see how tight, they're packed like sardines. To be able to produce food for, so many people, I don't even know how many covers they did. You wound up realizing that, like, okay, I can make it this way, or I can alter it. I can use my brain a little bit and innovate. I can make a few concessions, but I'm not going to sacrifice the integrity of the food. And that process, through that process, somewhere in that process, I wouldn't say magic happens, but it's like, oh, I'm using my brain. I'm now going to alter a recipe that is traditional, and it's been that way because somebody might have had the space to do that. But now, whether it's making an ice cream base for the soft serve, some of the stuff she does, I think, is incredibly simple, but deceivingly complex, which is why I'm enamored with Japanese cuisine, which is why I'm enamored with a lot of the cuisine that the chefs that you saw in the video before do, because it looks so damn simple, but it's not. But ultimately, which is why it's important, I think, that this class exists and Harvard has been supportive of it, is because it's not that difficult. The media has a crazy bent to sort of say that it's molecular gastronomy, which is a total, I'll say a bullshit word, because it's just a marketing term, and everything is gastronomy. And I wish I did better in school, because I would have a better understanding of what exactly is going on. And now I'm reading textbooks just so I can understand exactly what is going on, because now we reached a level in cuisine and gastronomy, I feel like, where you have to know not only how to make it, but why it's happening. Because when you understand why it's happening, you can understand why it's better, how to make it better. And that's the hardest thing to do with cooks. The cooks that we get, or anywhere, they're allergic to writing down recipes. They want to fly by the seat of their pants. I'm guilty of it too sometimes. As Daniel can attest, I'll just do something and be like, oh yeah, we'll write the recipe later. It takes discipline to write down your mistakes, to document it. Nobody wants to be reminded, oh, I failed again. I failed again the next day and the day after that. And for 100 days in a row, I failed. But what you don't realize, if you chart it out, it's progress. And I've spoken to other people that have labs, like the Chris Young, who's working for Nathan Myhrvold out in Seattle, and Heston out at the Fat Duck, only because they speak English and my Spanish is terrible. They're just like, they almost laughed when I was complaining, like, all we do is screw things up, because that's what you do when you're making food. And that's when I realized, whenever you make recipes, it's never, ever immediate success. It's been a progression of total disasters until you get to that point. I feel like if any chef, and I don't want to speak for anybody, I just imagine if any chef that tells you, like, I nailed this on the first round, they're totally full of themselves, because it's impossible to sort of make cuisine and make something that's delicious without making mistakes. And I feel that making mistakes, again, is something that has really defined who we are as a company, as a restaurant group, and our cuisine. So, this is before that last photo is, you go back, now at Milk Bar, we have a commissary in Brooklyn. Tosi at 700 square feet. This is a dilemma that we actually have now. She has 11,000 square feet now. What do you do? How do you look at food the same way? How do it really messes with your head. When you are given nothing and then you're given this sort of, anything you ever wanted, you sort of, you stumble a little bit. You know, we've done it when we moved Noodle Bar, and you know, I'm not going to speak for Toasty, but I know that they're going through some growing pains, and it's growing pains because all of a sudden you have all these tools, these foods, these things that you weren't able to work with before, and all of a sudden you have to change the way you cook. And it's not the easiest thing in the world. It would seem like it's the best thing to ever happen to a chef, to get all the tools and gadgets you want, but it's not. It's be careful what you wish for, is what I say. We're going to get into the first recipe that we're going to do. And Noodle Bar is, we moved it to a larger location just down the street from the original. And talking about limits, we wanted to put limits in terms of what we do, how we make things. And we serve ramen at the Noodle Bar. And again, Noodle Bar name only really these days, but it still takes us around 16 to 18 hours to make the stock, the soup. I always say stock. I'm a brainwashed myself. It's a soup. How do we make it? How do we improve upon it? And it's something we hadn't really revisited in quite some time until this past year. And it was these simple things. And by revisiting how to make soup, just regular soup, chicken soup, any type of soup, it sort of blew our minds in terms of how dumb we were for not even looking at it before, in the simplest ways. So we add all these chicken bones, chicken thighs, pork bones. There's over 300 pounds of at least 300 pounds of protein that goes into it, vegetables and bacon. It's an incredibly time-consuming, expensive process. So we sort of, I don't know why, but we're like, hey, can we make this stock soup in 3 hours or less? And we're going to make this now, hopefully in 10 minutes. Well, right now we have, before we had kombu, and we cooked it at 60 Celsius. And that's the optimal temperature that is now very much accepted in Kyoto, and once it's accepted in Kyoto, and then it's accepted the rest of Japan, and then accepted worldwide. But that's the optimal temperature before kombu turns a little bitter in the flavors, but it extracts most of the flavor for building the base for umami. And the idea was like, how do we make this soup without maybe using less ingredients? How do we sort of build upon lots of umami and lots of umami notes? How do we be more efficient about it? How do we sort of not deconstruct, but reevaluate how stocks are being made? How do we reevaluate, the rules that people tell you, like how to make a soup or a stock? We've gone to culinary school. If you go to culinary school, they tell you why. They don't tell you why you shouldn't do this or that. And that's what we revisited, what they tell you not to do. And we question, they tell you to add vegetables in the beginning of the stock. I've always thought it was a terrible idea to add vegetables at the beginning of a stock, especially making a veal jus or something like that. Because inevitably, at the end of the day, and I wish I could do this, it would be a great idea, is to put a veal jus, lamb jus, chicken jus, which is basically a reduced stock, with some herbal notes. You would not be able to tell the difference. I really believe if you change the labels on these items, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference because they've been reduced down to such a point with the vegetables that it becomes muddled. And I feel that the only thing that they share the same is the gelatin content. And it took some time and talking to other chefs, and I was like, why do we have to add vegetables? Why can't we add it to the end? Why don't we add mirepoix juice instead of thinning out the jus with water? Why don't we add freshly juiced vegetables to sort of brighten it up, and we can start to control the essence of vegetables, which is what we're doing here. So we have this kombu dashi, and right now, which one is that? Pork. So we're going to add a mixture of pork, chicken, beef, and the shiitake mushroom. Kombu is it's a dried kelp from the sea, and it's an important part in terms of Japanese cuisine. The best kombu is usually harvested off of northern Hokkaido, and it's quite expensive. So the idea was, I don't know how exactly, again, it happened, but it was just sort of thinking about how do we reduce the amount of chicken and pork we use into this? How do we control it better? And it was all about control in terms of our little bubble that we created at Noodle Bar. So it was, okay, I think it was all accidents, accidents and errors. He had said, oh, actually, I've never tried freeze-dried ice cream. And I was like, what's your problem? You never tried freeze-dried ice cream. So I go out and buy freeze-dried ice cream online, and I see freeze-dried chicken. I see freeze-dried pork. I see all these meats, and I'm just like, it was a camping site. And I bought a tremendous amount of it. And then I realized, if I bought, we pulverize this, but if I bought, say, this is a deli cup of dried chicken, freeze-dried chicken. And freeze-drying is a fantastic way of cooking. But unfortunately, it's incredibly expensive. So I'm hoping that one day someone's going to be able to create us a massive freeze dryer so we can do what we want to do. But that little cup is probably like the equivalent of 30 chicken. And it's not the bones you want. Bones you want is when you're making a stock. It's what's in the meat, the protein itself is what you want to extract from. So if we can actually get the concentrate and make it ourselves, then we're actually being more efficient, we're being smart about it, and we're going to get more flavor out of less product. Because ultimately, when you have and make a regular stock, you have so much waste that you can't serve. It's just cooked to crap. So what we do is, did you add the naj? Yeah. Okay, so right here we have, again, this is not what they tell you to do if you go to culinary school or if you go to work at a classic French restaurant. But I feel like if you add vegetables to a soup, you're never going to be able to control the flavor. I'm not a huge fan of celery. I think it makes some things bitter. I think onions sometimes add a nice bitter element too, but again, sometimes not necessary. The only thing that you really need, and Wiley's a good friend of mine, and actually this is what we talk about over beers. We're like, well, carrots are really the only vegetable you need because it adds a nice sweet element to a stock. But this is just the essence of a bunch of herbs and vegetables. So why don't we add that in and control the vegetable and herbal essence in the soup without cooking it out, without it being muddled. And so we've just taken the ramen, the base of the ramen soup, and it's pretty much finished. We don't have to cook it for 16 hours anymore. Right now we're limited now by the financing and the space to get a freeze dryer and to buy the proper chicken and pork that we want to create our product. But you strain this out and season it up, which Daniel will do, and you get a really fantastic, I feel, I'm not going to say better, but it's a much more intense way of making soup. And people might, and I know our own cooks come by the lab and they're like, well, you just basically made like instant ramen soup. And I'm like, yeah, but on our terms. It's like, no, you can't call BS on us because we did it ourselves. So, and in the world where, you want to be able to consolidate and make it more efficient. How's that taste? Want to season it and strain it out? So, although we're not doing this right now at our restaurants, it is something that we feel very strong about how we want to make our soups in in the future. We're the next step is actually to procure the right vegetables that get freeze dried, and the proteins. But we'll get there. But we wanted to share that with you because this is something where we thought that it would just totally be a joke. It would be very easy, but it has slowly become the gift that keeps on giving, because the more we revisit this, we get all these ideas. And one of the ideas that sort of stemmed out of one of the many, and we could be here all day, but was this beautiful sludge. And this is actually, we do it in stages. So we strain out the dry shiitake beforehand. And this is just shiitake, powdered shiitake. You got shiitake on you?
Great.
So this is another thing that we've done. Dry shiitakes are probably one of the highest, contain the highest elements in terms of making the basis for a dashi, or elevating umami notes. And they come in these massive bags, and space is a massive issue for us. Small restaurants, small restaurants, high volume, how do we sort of use this to our advantage? And for years on end, I'd always look at the wall of shiitakes and I'd be like, oh my God, that's taking up so much space. Now we just pulverize them all to a powder, cryovac them, and now we can fit 2 days worth in a box like this. It's simple stuff where you're like, why didn't I think of that before? It's so easy. So you take these dried shiitakes, which are incredibly flavorful, make a stock out of it, strain it out, and I saw this one day and I strained it out and I just left. I was like, that's gross, that looks like vomit. And then Burns here puts it in a dehydrator, and maybe you guys can pass that around. We're gonna keep it family style. Since we live in a world of rustico these days, we're gonna do it family style. And we just spread it out on a silpat, put it in a dehydrator, season it with some salt, and we have a shiitake chip. So, why don't I do this dish first, and then we'll go to the ramen. So, hopefully the shiitake chip will get to you by I'm done with this. So I almost wanted to punch Daniel when I found out how simple it was, because I was like, man, that was so good. And it's something you want to eat with a beer, and then there were so many applications. You could put it in salads, you could make little sandwiches with it, you could do so many things. And this is probably like the 20th dish we've made with this simple mushroom chip. Again, we talk about it, and I was like, why don't we make a cereal out of it? Why don't we make a cereal out of the mushroom chip? And we did. We rolled it in isomalt, which is a modified sugar. Then it's not as sweet as regular sugar. It has a little bit of sweetness, but not that much. But you can make, a caramel out of it without it being sweet. And what we don't want is to be overly. We wanted it to just bind together the mushroom chips with some chestnuts and some other things. We were just talking today earlier, like, oh, we should add oats and make it like a granola, really. So this is sort of how it all happens, And if we didn't do the ramen stock, and we didn't have the pulverized shiitake, we wouldn't have sort of probably the number one idea of the year for us, which was a mushroom chip. It came out of nothing, garbage. It came out of something that we were very proud of, but the thing that actually was the most productive, most used food item for us this year was this mushroom chip. So we made some meringues, Woodruff puffs, and chestnut puffs. Really just a meringue to sort of replicate again, like I guess a Lucky Charm like cereal. some white fungus. It should be a better name than white fungus, but and this is a dish that we decided would work better at Co, because we're pouring hot soup over it. We want it still to have some texture when it gets to the customer. How do we, we'd obviously love to serve this at other restaurants, but Co is a 12-seat restaurant where pretty much a diner is sitting right in front of us. And we're able to do things that would be prohibitive at other restaurants because of the temperature and getting it from the pass to the customer. The pass is where basically the food is plated. And usually, because I'm not saying anything about front of the house, but things get screwed up. So we poured tableside. I wish I could, have a sample for you guys to taste it, but we're going to pour a little sep oil, which is basically porcini. So we're having elements that are very winter-like. We garnish with a little tarragon. It almost looks like a little breakfast. We're not trying to be, too playful with it, but it was just more like, is that something I would want to eat? And is that an innovative idea? We think so. Is it using crazy technology? No. But we used the ingredients that we had and pushed it as far as possible. What are you doing? What are you doing? Move it over here. Nice try. Chestnut milk. So, but we could use, and that's the thing, is by the time it hits the menu at Co, it's probably going to change to, we're already thinking just to make it light and just maybe just do like a matsutake broth or something like that. So it really sort of was a shock to us that we could make a delicious broth in 45 minutes. It made us question, were we doing something wrong? Is this adhering to the tradition of France that we hold so dearly? Are we totally screwing things up? So we decided actually no. But obviously I'm sure people will be quite upset. So this is something that we would serve at our restaurant. And people always say like, why is your ramen $14? It's because it's not 99-cent instant ramen. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. I don't understand how people can go to an Italian restaurant and spend $19 for spaghetti and meatballs, but complain for I think a very delicious soup. I've added some pulled pork shoulder, fish cakes. Usually we add a local green and some roasted pork belly and some scallions. And it's a big change in terms of how we go about making food. The broth is obviously different, tastes different. So in a way, I feel like it's not going to be like New Coke or Crystal Pepsi or something like that. It's my biggest fear, but when we do unveil it, hopefully it's going to have a good reception. I like Crystal Pepsi. So one of the things that we've done, instead of working on just dishes like that, this is sort of a culmination of years of screwing around with stuff. I I had the pleasure of spending time in Japan and working there a couple of different occasions, and I fell in love with dashi. I thought it was, dashi is bonito fish that's been steamed, smoked, dehydrated, and injected with a mold that basically becomes petrified. And it doesn't have to be bonito, but that is called katsuobushi. You have, they can make it with mackerel, they can make it with sardines. And one of the things that we've always had a struggle with at Momofuku is, we're a noodle bar. We would love to get the best product possible. It's always our number one goal. You can't make delicious food without great product. And unfortunately, like the Italians, if I wanted to get a great wheel of Parmesan cheese, they're going to keep the best wheels of Parmesan for themselves, as I would, and send the okay stuff to America. And the same goes with the katsuobushi, which is incredibly expensive, actually, in Japan as well. And there's very few people that make it the same artisanal way, and to buy just the bad stuff is cost prohibitive. To buy the good stuff is no way that I'm even going to be guaranteed to get the good stuff. And consistency is a big thing. So, which is why we sort of played around with the idea of making bacon dashi, because the smell reminded me of what katsuobushi was in Japan. Like what we do produce in America is actually amazing bacon, country hams. These are why I'm actually, people find it funny because I'm Korean American, but it's like one of the few things you can call American. You got jazz, you got country ham, and American bacon, and baseball. That's it. So, I don't know how it happened exactly, because while I document mistakes, I don't document success either. But we started to have the idea. I had the idea of, I guess it was my last trip to Kyoto. I was like, why? I was just like, they have the best soy sauce. They have the best miso. They have the best everything. And I got so tired of having an excuse for myself of saying, oh, it's because they have the best. We can't do anything about it. Why don't we just make it ourselves? Why don't we make our own soy sauce? Why don't we age it in bourbon barrels? Why don't we make our own, shiro miso, white miso? It's not like America doesn't produce soybeans. So why don't we make our own type of bushi? Bushi doesn't have to be fish, It could be. But so one day we had all these tenderloins in-house. We had a carcass. And I hate pork tenderloin. I don't like it. And I was like, well, it seems to be lean enough. It looked like a piece of fish to me. So I had an idea. Why don't we steam it at 100 Celsius, just like they would do to make katsuobushi in Japan? The standard method. Obviously, there's varieties of ways of making it. And why don't we steam it, dry it? Steam it, smoke it over hickory, and then dehydrate it. Traditionally it's done in the sun. And then the mold is where I had a big problem. So I called Chris Young, who works for Nathan Myhrvold, who used to be his boss and the head of the lab at the Fat Duck, and he's like, well, it's basically it's a strain of a mold that you can find at any house. And I was like, where do I order it? And he's like, if you order it, you're gonna die because it's what he said something and scared me. And I was like, okay, we're never gonna do this. And hang up the phone, and I have this smoked, steamed, dehydrated lump of tenderloin now. And I hang up the phone, and I'm like, oh, there's a bucket of rice. I'd love to tell you that it was a, stroke of genius. I'd love to tell you it's because I thought of penicillin or something. No, I just was lazy, and it was an accident, and I just shoved the tenderloins in this bucket of rice, labeled it, put it up in the corner. I said, out of peace, out of mind. Let's not think about it ever again. And then Tim Mazzo, one of the chef de cuisines at Sambar, comes up and he's like, Dave, you should take a look at what's going on. So it was like Technicolor tenderloin. It had all sorts of things going on. And I was like, what is happening here? So This was the original version. And I don't know if you can get in there, it's totally petrified. And you get shavings that look a lot like katsuobushi. Then the idea came, because what we do is we make fun of each other at Momofuku. How could we do it with, scraps? How could we do it with, parts of the pig that most people wouldn't eat? So, we actually have a video. So, we just take the tenderloin off, but you could do it with any scrap. Again, fat content has to be low. I'd say lower than 5% in total. And all we do is grind it up. You could do it with ham. You could do it with anything except, the fatty cuts of the pig. And it just seems to be nobody at our restaurant wants to serve tenderloin. So tenderloins are, what was once the cherished cut is our trash cut at our restaurant. And one of the ideas that I asked Amy and the team at Harvard was, and it was actually one of the few meat glue questions that Wiley didn't know either, and Ajinomoto didn't know. What did the covalent bonds that were created with Activa, would they hold and last over a period of time? And it worked. I don't know what the exact answer is, but it certainly worked. And this is, I'll shave some after you guys see the process. So we had 2% of Activa, RM. We tried slurry. 2% is a lot, but we did it with 1.5%, but it would fall apart. 2%, rock solid, and that's what we kept. So we steamed it till it was cooked through at 100 Celsius in the bag, and smoked it for 5-6 hours over a smoker that actually is designed for boats. And we had the real pleasure, and I don't think we'd be able to, not only am I lucky to be here, but without the help of the team here, particularly Ben Wolf and Rachel Dutton, who hopefully can help explain some of the next slides. They were able, because no one had ever done this before, as far as I was concerned, or I was asking around. Nobody had made katsuobushi out of pork. Nobody had created mold and bacteria out of rice. So we had help, and we didn't even know it was edible. We didn't know if it was safe. So I called around people, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's a great idea, Dave, but you sure that it's okay to eat? You sure it's okay to serve people?" So that was a main concern. Rachel and Ben, could you come down, or if you're here? All right. Sorry to put you guys on the spotlight. But again, without your guys' help, we would be totally lost. You can hopefully explain what's happening up here.
So this is just a close-up of the bushi. So if you sort of zoomed in with a dissecting microscope, so you kind of get in at a scale. So that whole area is maybe like 1 centimeter wide. It's this really cool landscape that as a microbiologist, we just think is mind-blowing because it's all these microbes living on this pork, which is just, it's beautiful. So think of this as the microbial landscape. And so Rachel and I are microbiologists, so we essentially did CSI bushi. So So we went in, and to figure out what these guys were actually growing on this pork and what microbes were involved in the process, we dived in with our microbiology tools. Do you want to? Oh, yes. Oh, so this is actually the dominant fungus that these guys ended up growing. So when Dave threw the pork in the rice, he happened to choose a great place to put it because this rice that they had was carrying a species of fungus that is actually really widespread in lots of fermented foods. So sake, for example, soy sauce, all those things are produced with the help of fungi. And in this case, this is the dominant fungus that was growing along in the rice and is playing a big role in making this from pork into this beautiful thing for making broths.
What's its name?
So this is Pichia burtonii, is the scientific name. They don't have common names, unfortunately, because they're the lowly fungi. But this is, so in this case, I took a piece of the rice from the batch where they were making this, put it on a plate, and you can actually do, this is the fungus proliferating out onto a petri dish in the lab, growing out from. So we're actually going in and identifying what these fungi are using the CSI approach. And this is actually cool because after 5.5 years of being an evolutionary biologist and sequencing lots of DNA of things that most people don't care about, here I was actually able to use those tools and make an evolutionary tree of the Momofuku fungus. Which, this is the highlight of my PhD. I'm telling you, seriously. Yeah. And essentially all this is this is a tree of fungi, and the tree is showing you how closely related, based on DNA, so the DNA sequences and all these different fungi, how closely related the Momofuku fungus is to other fungi. And so you can see there's that orange thing up there that says Momofuku fungus isolated from the bushi rice. So that's one of the dominant fungi involved in this process of making this cool pork product. And you can see all the relatives, including here, sort of at the bottom, there's a fungus from sake. So it makes sense. A lot of rice-associated fungi were growing in this product.
So I was working with a group of 3 students on this project, and our task was to try and identify the bacteria. So Ben tackled the fungi, and so we wanted to know what types of bacteria are on this bushi. And bacteria are incredibly important for many different things on our planet. They don't just cause disease, and they're actually really important for food. Many fermented foods require the action of bacteria, and it's really the action of these microbes and their metabolisms that impart a lot of the flavors and smells that we associate with foods. So we, with the students, we isolated some of the bacteria that were growing on the bushi, and these are just close-ups, again, of individual colonies of bacteria. So originally these were single cells, and they grew up to form these large colonies. And there's a picture of a fungus and small bacterial colonies next to it. These are some more just beautiful pictures of fungi and bacteria growing together. So in this bushi, there are many different types of microbes. They're all growing together and contributing in some way to the final flavor. And what we did was, again, sort of the CSI thing. We isolated the DNA. We identified the sequences of bacteria that were in there, and we placed them on a phylogenetic tree to see what the organisms that are there, what are they closely related to, and maybe that'll tell us something about what they might be doing. And this is a tree of some of the bacteria that we identified from the rice and the pork. And the rice, a lot of the bacteria from the rice are closely related to these Staphylococcus bacteria, especially the Staphylococcus saprophyticus. And this is actually a bacteria that's found everywhere in the environment, and it's been found many times in fermented pork products like traditional salamis and sopressata. So this is something that you would find actually in other fermented pork products. And then the pork one you see up on the top, this could actually be a new species of bacteria that nobody's ever seen before. It's not closely related to anything we've ever seen. So it would require a little more work to actually confirm that, but you never know.
Can we name it like a constellation?
Yeah, exactly.
Or like a comet?
Bacillus momofucensis. There we go.
That's it?
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Group hug. You guys are the best. Thank you so much, guys. As you can see, this is the overlap of or science can help a tremendous amount to the culinary world today, because I don't know any chef that knows any of that CSI stuff at all. So, you know, I'm incredibly thankful and indebted to you guys forever. So, you know, one of the things that we also wanted to do when we created the Bushi was, how do we, you know, we're doing this, but you eventually don't get that great of a yield. And again, for us, we're always trying to be frugal. How do we get the most out of our product? So if we made it into a block, as you saw in the video, you get these ridiculously long strands and 100% yield. And bring it to a boil, and we're going to let it steep like a tea. And you can do it twice. You can make a remoulade with it. I feel that for me, actually, right now, the second dashi you make is more to my flavor profile that I like. And with fish, it seems to be that the second one is not the garbage, but the one that you might cook rice or make a stew with. But I think it's a little bit more delicate on the second go around. If we can strain this, and we'll season it with sake, mirin, and soy, we'll show you the last dish. That was a total and utter accident, error. It was the idea was there, but the execution and the end result was something that we didn't plan. The idea was I just come back from Kyoto. I was lucky to work with Nakamura-san and Murata-san. These are two of the kings of Kyoto cuisine. They have multiple Michelin stars, restaurants that are 400, 500 years old, things that you can't really comprehend. These guys are like 6th, 7th generation chefs. Or Murata's like, I don't know, 400. Nakamura's a little bit older. Anyway. You know, I love dashimaki tamago, and making it, you use kuzu, which is similar to arrowroot. It's just like 100 times more powerful in terms of the strength of it. We also added, well, normal kuzu. It's just kuzu, dashi, lightly beaten eggs, and you fry it in a pan. You roll it up into like a square block, and it's so delicious. But the problem is, it's so heavy. It's so dense. How could we serve? I mean, I didn't want to be at a restaurant. Then, like, how could we serve that as a portion that's not just a massive block? That's not just a slice that you might see at a normal Japanese restaurant. How do we serve that with it being light, with it sort of being irregular in shape? I thought, why don't we make it into a noodle? And the idea was, okay, we're going to instead of kuzu, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add egg, dashi, and we're going to add a hydrocolloid. But we're going to switch out kuzu with methylcellulose F50, you know, which is the food grade hydrocolloid, which I'm sure you've gone over in class. And it goes really well with this dish. We tried other grades, and the temperature set perfect because it sort of activates at around 63 Celsius, and the egg cooks around 62.5, 63 Celsius. So the idea was there, but the execution really wasn't there. And the original idea was I'll just show it in here, was I was going to get it and just sort of shoot it under the water. And as you can see, it was a total failure as it is right now. Hasn't changed. And and the idea was like we release it under the water, and the temperature from the water would set the egg, but it just didn't work. So I was like, okay, it's all really regular. Why don't we just make it really irregular? So if we didn't add the methyl cell at 50, it would collapse immediately. It would cook, but it starts to gel at the temperature that's in here right now. And I let it steam for about 30 seconds or so, just so it starts to act and make sure that it's properly hydrated. And now I can baste it. And it absorbs the liquid. So we've done nothing other than sort of we didn't change the flavor profile at all. It's still the same thing you would get in Japan, but it's no longer Japanese, it's American, it's ours. It's something that I think is very light. Female. Slotted? Anyway. So again, this is a dish that you wouldn't be able to serve at any other restaurant except a restaurant like Ko. So we serve it in a little bit of the broth, which is the momofuku bushi now, I guess. And it's a different type of egg. I love eggs, and it's something that I love dearly because I think it at least in my view, it's not a bastardization of what I feel to be Japanese cuisine. I think it's trying to pay respect to Japanese cuisine, but at the same time, it's American, and it's using some new ways of cooking without compromising the integrity of it being American, or it just, we're just trying to find a delicious way, an innovative way of serving something. And again, it was a total mistake, but through constant tweaks of that mistake, we finally end up with a dish that we were very happy with. So that was sort of it. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so there are at least two things left to do. One is that you get to ask questions. The second is that we're having a raffle. I'm hoping that someone who knows how to run a raffle will come up and explain it to me. But in the meantime, while we're waiting, maybe someone has a question. And I think there are microphones. You guys, we have microphones. And are there people? There's a person here. Okay, this will be exercise.
I know that you use a lot of unconventional products and you've done some experimenting. Have you ever thought of using Spam? And what are your feelings about Spam?
That was a good question.
You had to go there. Oh, man. Well, Spam is, I think, adored by Koreans, weirdly enough. But I don't have a problem with Spam. But I don't think you're going to see it on a menu. If we do serve a Spam, it'll be something that we make on our own terms, again. But, I got nothing against Spam. My mom loves Spam.
Okay, we have another question? Here, let me go to the side of the room. If anyone else is interested in running with a microphone, this is an interesting opportunity.
Send us around.
Have you ever used any of the produce that comes out of Brooklyn Grange? You know, that farming that goes on the roofs out in Long Island City and
Well, I think the question, touches upon a larger subject in terms of urban city farming. There are some restaurants that are doing it and supplementing, the vegetables, but more often than not, it's more just herbs. Right now, we're working closely with Alice Waters, John Lyon, a bunch of people that are trying to bring the edible schoolyard to Brooklyn. Hopefully, not just for kids, but we can build gardens throughout New York, so it's not just turnips and cabbage year-round, or just we're growing thyme and rosemary, which is essentially, for me, what a lot of these farms are doing. Although places like Roberta's in Brooklyn, they're doing some fantastic stuff in terms of what they're growing. But I think that until until we figure out how to sort of do it on a regular basis, I'm not reluctant, but I'm going to wait till urban farming in New York City is a more viable option. We're going to stick to the upstate and into the North Fork of Long Island.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is about the freeze drying of the meats. You just showed us some powders. And earlier in the 20th century, the fish was what they call a flash drying or flash freezing of the fish. Actually kept the content of the flavor of the fish intact. But if you froze it in a regular ice freezer, it destroyed the flavor. My question is that do you know when you do the freezing and drying of the meats, do you lose any flavors or any other textures during that process?
This is a conversation we had with Ted from CP Kelco, big, giant sort of food, additive firm, but they're not evil. They're nice. And the consensus was that freeze drying actually was the best, most efficient way of preserving flavor that exists. And a lot of things that people say that are freeze dried aren't. They're just sort of desiccated powders that are just sort of rehydrated and sort of shot out in a frozen room. Freeze drying, the process itself is, to my knowledge and to the people that I've asked, the best way of ensuring the flavor. Maybe not the texture anymore, but what we're after is the flavor and the essence of that flavor. So.
I know the food was made in a lecture theatre, but can we raffle the food off too?
Absolutely. We're raffling off Lake Crusette as well, right? You can do both. I think that's a win-win. Yes.
When you're working on a dish, do you know what restaurant it's going to be a dish for? And in general, what determines which restaurants your dishes end up at?
The question being what restaurant, when we come up with a dish, right now it's sort of all crazy. I would say the more refined, some of the dishes you've seen today, like that soup, I thought about serving it at Sambar. We could do it, but it's more of a timing factor, and it's more of are you going to lose the integrity of that dish by the time it gets to the customer? So a lot of the dishes that have come up or are sort of really a la minute and time sensitive, they're for Co. Not to say that we couldn't do it at Sambar at all. Sambar is very ambitious in its own right. And the chef de cuisines and sous chefs there are making dishes that are very tailored for those restaurants. Noodle Bar is the one exception where I think that it is more simple in its approach. I wouldn't use the word rustic, but it's not. I'm not saying it's not as complex either. It's just its own entity. So like when we make a noodle bar dish, it's almost like that's a noodle bar dish. There's just no way around it. I can't really articulate a better way to describe which dish goes for what, but it's certainly, I think, identifying your kids. You're like, you know that's that one, you know that one is that one. So.
Okay, so I think we're going to take one more question and then we're going to do our wrap.
Have you made or considered making a gourmet vegetable dish like a with just a carrot or a beet?
Funny enough, we just finished one with the carrot. We actually, I'd like to say that I took credit for making carrot dashi, but I cannot. I have to give credit to Mauro Colagreco, who's the chef at Mirazor, Menton, on the border of France and Italy. He made a carrot dashi, and it sort of, my mind melted when he did it. I was like, I can't believe you did that. It was one of those, I can't believe I didn't think of those things. And we took that idea and we're cooking baby vegetables in it. We're using that dashi to make a carrot puree. Just sort of a study of the carrot, which is something that we grow really well in New York right now. And it's a dish that actually, to the previous question, that's one dish right now. We're like, which restaurant do we do? Is it sambar, or is it a co-dish? Because it's very I would say one of the most elaborate dishes we've come up with in a while. So yes, timing is perfect with that dish. It's you know, there's like carrots, but done 10 or 12 different ways. I don't like pork tenderloin. I like pork tenderloin when it's well marbled and when it's in Spain.
I actually think that's an excellent comment upon which to clap. Perfectly appropriate.